there's something I want to read to you guys. And obviously you're going to be able to tell what I'm about to talk to you about immediately. In 2009, members ICS Vortex and Mustis independently announced their departure from Dimmu Borgir. Mustis released a statement claiming his disfavor with the band, stating that he was not properly credited for his writing contributions to the band's music, mentioning possibly taking legal action. Dimmu Borgir soon after confirmed the pair's dismissal from the band, releasing a statement explaining why the two were fired. Shagrath, Silanos, and Gowder wrote, "Funny then, how the new album is halfway finished, written already by the rest of us without any of these guys' input, still having all these elements we're known for." Yeah, I'm talking about ABRAHADABRA, or however you want to say it, by Dimmu Borgir. It was just released today. It's an album that I've actually listened to quite a bit in the weeks that have kind of led up to this particular moment. And I mention this particular statement because while the final part of that press release, so to speak, whatever you want to call it, it's on Wikipedia, it's on, any other reputable site. It's funny how part of that is semi-true, but a lot of it isn't. Why? Well, I'm wearing an Iron Maiden shirt because I don't have a Dimmu Borgir shirt, because whenever I went to see Dimmu Borgir in concert, I decided I'd rather have a Hypocrisy shirt than a Dimmu Borgir shirt. Why would you want a Hypocrisy shirt as opposed to a Dimmu Borgir shirt, Cover Killer Nation? Because, voice in my head, at the time that one was harder to find, not to mention Hypocrisy might just be better. Yeah. So basically that decision was back whenever I really felt Dimmu Borgir was at their peak, so to speak, after releasing such albums such as Puritanical Euphoric Misanthropia, as well as Death Called Armageddon. In fact, the tour I went was right after the release of Death Called Armageddon. However, this particular album, released here in 2010, only has two original members of the band left from whenever they began. That was, of course, Shagrath and Silanos, with, of course, ICS Vortex and Mustis leaving after In Sorte Diaboli. Now, why is it that I say that the statement made by the band themselves is semi-untrue? And that's because whenever I think of Dimmu Borgir, one person that I certainly thought of a lot was ICS Vortex. This is a man whose clean vocals definitely ushered in a whole new philosophy for a lot of bands out there. And this is something that's been done multiple times by other bands. It's not necessarily that Dimmu Borgir coined this particular element or style into their music. No. I'm not claiming that whatsoever. However, I am saying that they were certainly one of the best at blending together those oddly and eerily symphonic vocals, so to speak, along with the deathy, the black metal growls that you hear emanating from Shagrath at all times. So what did they do to kind of replace this? They kind of, tried some different things. They tried some different vocalists. They hired an awful female vocalist for their first single, Gateways. Oh, God. Whenever Gateways first came into my possession and I heard those awful vocals, I almost immediately decided not to listen to the album and just review it right after that. And that review was going to be an absolute atrocity. That's right, I was going to do the noobish thing of reviewing an album after hearing only one track. If you remember, guys, the last time I reviewed an album without listening to the whole entire thing was Congregation of the Damned by Atreyu. And we all remember what happened with that review. I ended up without a head. That was after only 2 songs. But this was going to be a review that was going to be after hearing just one song. Thank God I actually listened to the rest of the album, because my opinion of it is a little bit different because of that. As far as their albums are concerned, this album is not necessarily terrible, but it's not something that I'm going to really return to over and over again now that I am making the review of this particular record. It's enjoyable, but at the same time, it's kind of bland. There's a lot of elements that they had on their prior releases, even before In Sorte Diaboli, which for some strange reason everybody is goo goo gaga for, and so many new fans were made that they think that's their first album because they're idiots. But there's just so many facets from their particular musical style that just seem to be oddly missing. Yes, they still do sort of have that symphonic element. Yes, they still have a lot of the elements that you've heard from albums prior to this. However, it just seems a little bit different with the personnel that they have at the helm, which is something that is obviously going to occur, considering you're not going to replace members by getting people that sound exactly like them. That sort of defeats the purpose. However, whenever you have a really good core that's making some strong music, not to mention, I really built the whole devotion to this particular band, really hand and foot on their own, working together to make this priceless music. It's a little bit awkward to hear it without it, and sometimes the opinion of it can be quite disenchanting. This particular album, though, it's not necessarily just because of the personnel change. It's just because some of the material on here is just plain weak. Gateways is an atrocious lead-off single. It was a single that whenever I first started hearing it, I thought to myself, okay, alright. And then it just went right down the shithole. Literally went right down the shithole. It was like I took a nice big nasty dump and just flushed it, and the song just decided to jump in to save itself. Now, there are songs such as the band's self-titled song, Dimmu Borgir, that is definitely a real high point on this particular release. However, there are some things that you hear in songs like Endings and Continuations, as well as some other tracks that you just heard before with this band. There's symphonic elements that they kind of interject in the middle of songs or right at the beginning just to kind of add that little extra dynamism to it. As cool as it is, and as it's something that's become so commonplace in symphonic black metal that we're really kind of used to it. That's kind of its downfall. The downfall is that Dimmu has used things like this before, and so whenever you hear it again and again and again, it's not exactly something that shocks you, surprises you, or really causes you to get that real hot-blooded feeling inside your veins where it really takes you to another level. And that's kind of a good theme for this record. It is something where they had to make a lot of things happen prior, without having some of their members. But they're claiming that they had most of this album written just between the three of them. Which, if that's the case, then they're definitely direly missing the input from those remaining members that are now gone, from ICS and from Mustis. So, what are the positives of this particular record? First positive that I can think of is that it's not completely a total load of shit. This is not an album that I'm going to shit all over right now. It's an album that I'm going to say is definitely not going to make the top 20 list, but it's not going to be the worst album of the year by far. This is definitely at least a 6.5 to a 6.75 out of 10, which is probably one of the lowest scores you've ever heard me utter, but then again, I lost my head for Atreyu. I didn't give it a number. Another one of the positives of this, ladies and gentlemen, is that since ICS is now out of Dimmu Borgir, that opens the door for the reformation of Arcturus. And let me tell you, if there is anybody who is excited about a reformation of Arcturus, that would be me. Now, this is something that could have happened easily without ICS Vortex, don't get me wrong. However, this is definitely something that will really help progress that along and really make it seem like an idea, something that just needs to happen. And since it's going to happen, it's going to happen, so there's nothing that we have to worry about with that. Even if ICS doesn't even jump ship to Arcturus, even if he decides to do something completely different, I don't care. I will use this particular departure as methodology for the reason why Arcturus is back together, and I will praise that day, regardless to whether or not it ends up being fact or fiction. Mainly because Arcturus is just one of those bands that's definitely worth it, and I'm getting this strange feeling that Dimmu might be becoming one of those bands that isn't. Is this the worst album of all time? Nowhere close. Is this the worst album even of this year? Nowhere close. Did it fail to impress me the way that I thought that it would? Yes. And that is what makes this album, honestly, a disappointment. Will it be the biggest disappointment of the year? No. But it's going to rank up there. This album is very, very decent. But decent does not make an album good. And in order for me to really feel okay about this next chapter in Dimmu's career, it had to be at least good, if not great. I think I'm being sued. Take care, guys.